What if the most important generation is the one you almost never hear about? Usually, all the attention goes to baby boomers, millennials, and Gen Z. But in between them, there's a whole generation that barely gets mentioned. That's Generation X, people born between 1965 and 1980. These are the older colleagues who just do their job quietly and never complain. Your parents, whose calmness can sometimes feel like coldness. The people who built the internet, but don't put their lives on display on social media. And here's something almost no one talks about. Their psychology might be the most overlooked and misunderstood of all generations alive today. So what shaped them the most? They became the first generation where latchkey kids, children coming home to an empty house with a key, stopped being rare and became the norm for millions of kids. Imagine this, it's 1978. You're 8 years old. You come home, unlock the door, and no one's there. No smartphones. No cameras. No way to check in. You're just alone. You make your own snack. Turn on the TV maybe for channels. Do your homework by yourself. And wait. By 1984, around 7 million kids in the US regularly stayed home alone after school. That's not rare. That's a whole generation learning early. Help might not come, you handle things yourself. And that experience taught them more than independence. It taught them that actions have immediate consequences. You couldn't text your parents. You couldn't Google answers. And you definitely couldn't ask chat. When parents came home, things were simple, rules were strict, discussions were minimal. Mistakes had immediate consequences. No one really asked how you felt. Psychologically, this created what's called a high-contingency environment, where actions and consequences are tightly linked. Do something, you get a result right away. So they learned to think ahead. To predict outcomes. To always have backup plans. They kind of always keep several possible scenarios in mind. To younger people, that can seem unnecessary or even strange. But it's really just a habit shaped by experience, when any mistake had immediate consequences. Generation X grew up in a contradictory reality. They were told about stability and a secure life, but in real life they saw their parents divorcing in the 70s and 80s. They also watched people invest years of effort into one company, only to receive a layoff notice during the next round of cuts. They were told, work hard, follow the rules and everything will work out. But in practice, they saw those very rules changing right in front of them. So what psychologists call defensive pessimism is, for Generation X, just a realistic view of life. It's not about cynicism. It's more like they developed an internal defense. They can hope for the best. But deep down they're still ready for things to suddenly change and the ground to disappear beneath them, because that's often exactly what happened. That's also why you don't really see them much on social media. They grew up in a world where personal things stayed personal. If you messed up as a kid, only a few people knew, and over time, everyone just forgot about it. There were no phones, no viral videos at most, an awkward story that stayed within your circle. Something that happened in the yard, the basement, or a parking lot, and that was it. It didn't go any further. So the idea of putting your life out there for strangers doesn't feel inspiring or interesting to them. If anything, it feels risky, like you're giving away too much of yourself to something you can't take back. And there's logic to that. They're just used to the idea that not everything should be public. That part of life is just for you and your people, and doesn't need to be shared with the whole world. It's not that they struggle with technology or don't understand it. It's more about inner caution. When you don't rush to share everything, because the less others know about you, the safer and calmer you feel. Generation X basically turned irony into a defense mechanism. It's easier to joke, stay a bit detached, and lighten things before it starts to actually hit too close. And if you think about it, it makes sense why that happened. They grew up during the Cold War, when nuclear threats were talked about almost casually. Schools even had drills to duck and cover, as if a regular desk could really protect you. When adults live with the feeling that everything could collapse at any moment, but pretend everything is fine, you get used to holding to opposite ideas in your head at once. And just in case, you don't get too close, like you're always leaving yourself an exit. What's interesting is that despite all this, Generation X developed a very distinct work style that's still noticeable today. They don't like to talk about it or show it off. They just quietly get things done. That attitude started in their teenage years, through simple but tough part-time jobs that now feel like something from the past, early mornings delivering newspapers, working in stores. Shifts at fast food places where sometimes you had to count change in your head if the system failed. These weren't resume lines, it was real immersion into adult life. Where even at 12 years old, you might be responsible for delivering newspapers across a whole neighborhood. They saw how their parents' generation was shaken by changes in the corporate world. So they didn't believe in loyalty to employers, but they valued and developed their own skills and expertise. They can't control whether they'll be laid off or kept. But what they can control is their own value, whether they can become the kind of specialist who's hardest to replace when cuts begin. There's an interesting contradiction in Generation X psychology. They're extremely independent, yet they can also cooperate calmly and without making a big deal out of it. They're not used to asking for help. They learned early on to handle things on their own. But when others need help, they step in without words and without trying to show it off. This comes from strong friendships that weren't always about choice, but about necessity, during times when adults weren't around. Their attitude toward authority is mixed. What matters to them isn't the title, but real competence. If someone earned their position through skills and experience, they'll follow without questions. But if there's no real knowledge behind a loud title, their patience runs out quickly. Generation X tends to question authority because they've seen many times how people in power, without enough competence, make bad decisions. From the Watergate scandal to the Iran-Contra affair and failures during the AIDS crisis, they grew up during major social and political upheavals. On top of that, they faced economic challenges that the previous generation encountered much less often. Younger Gen Xers graduated during the dot-com crash, while older ones hit their career peak during the 2008 financial crisis. In reality, they went through multiple waves of economic instability. That's why having multiple income sources is common for them, not because they're naturally entrepreneurial, but as a rational survival strategy. They learned from experience that stability can be temporary, and relying on just one source is risky. Generation X often shows what researchers call extreme self-reliance, sometimes bordering on constant internal tension. They handle crises and instability very well, but that resilience is often built on a mindset of not depending on others. According to the Journal of Adult Development, Gen X is less likely to seek social support during stressful times. It's not that they don't have people to turn to, it's just that asking for help can feel like weakness or a personal failure. This same independence shows in how they learned and processed information. Before the internet, knowledge was different. Generation X spent hours in libraries, flipping through catalogs and cards to find a single book with the answer. Information had a tangible cost. It required time and effort. That's why they treated it more carefully and thoughtfully. In cognitive psychology, this is called deep encoding, when knowledge gained through effort sticks better in memory. From a young age, they were used to figuring things out on their own. If a bike chain came off or a TV started flickering, you didn't go to a repair shop. You flipped the bike over, got your hands dirty with oil, and figured it out yourself. That's how mechanical intuition developed, to the confidence that with enough patience and basic tools, you can understand and fix almost anything physical. Now they're watching their kids grow up in a completely different reality, a world of overprotection, constant monitoring, and social media where almost every step is recorded. They gave their kids the attention and involvement they themselves lacked, but at the same time, they worry, did they make them too soft, too dependent, too open to outside judgment? In the Gen X worldview, being visible means making yourself a target. The less attention you attract, the safer and calmer you are. And that's why they might be the last generation that truly knows what it's like to be alone with their own thoughts, without constant notifications, without the habit of instantly looking things up online. They know how to sit with boredom, handle silence, and find their own way out even if it takes time and effort. They're the generation that connects the past and the future. Like bridges, they don't seek recognition. Their role is to hold things together, to provide stability and transition. They just do their job without expecting applause, and maybe that's their essence, to focus on results without worrying about whether anyone notices their contribution. If this resonates with you, stick around. Following will help you not miss the next breakdowns.